You cannot heal what you won't talk about.
Yeah.
And that's not just with the person you're dating, but that's
right.
with just anybody.
Yeah. You got to be vulnerable.
You have to be vulnerable. I think in any relationship, the more vulnerable you are, the quicker you can get to who you really are, the better it is for both of you individually.
Welcome back for another episode of The Redeemed Man. I'm Nate Dewberry, and today I have with me Matthew Sanchez and Kory Osigian. Matthew, as some of you may know, is a part of our team here at The Redeemed. He helps us with videography, and he is a communicator, a visionary, all kinds of things that Matthew can be known as. But most of all, he's friendly. He makes everybody feel good about themselves. Kory is a captain in the Army, and he is very into endurance sports, quite the race, runner. So we'll talk maybe a little bit about that.
I don't know if I would say that, but I appreciate it.
Even went all the way to Hawaii recently for a race. So.
You ran to Hawaii?
I swam to Hawaii and then raced when I got there.
Wow.
But welcome to the show, guys.
Well, Nate, first of all, thank you for saying all those nice things. I mean, you said them before, but not like that. That's really nice. We got to do this more often. So you can say more nice
we'll
things.
try it. We'll try it. And I hope I say some nice things.
You do, Nate, but never like that. I never heard you call me a visionary. That's really nice.
It's because I'm here. He's being extra nice.
That's what it is. That's nice. That's a compliment coming from the boss guy. So,
yeah.
Well, we're going to jump right into what we've been talking about. We've been talking about relationships, and both of you guys are single currently.
Mm-hmm.
At least, you know, you're not married. You don't have, nobody has a ring on their fingers.
Yeah,
so,
I do have a girlfriend. May,
yes.
if you're listening, I do have a girlfriend.
Yes.
We'll get into talking a little bit about the girlfriend and kind of relationships, but welcome to another topic where we're going to delve in really to the relationships and talk about being single. So you guys are going to help our audience understand a little bit about the challenges that single guys face and some of the, honestly, I think benefits, because a lot of people see it as all negative, but I think there's some positives to being single too. So first question, do you want to
by the way, I just want to say, he said he had a girlfriend. I'm working on it, but I'm not like fully single. Just like, you know.
So first question is, do you guys want to get married?
Of course.
Yeah.
I think that's always been a desire of mine. I remember when I was in, now this is not crazy, okay? This is the real deal. This is honest truth, okay? I was in middle school, and I would definitely tell like my peers that I was married, and I had a son named David. And I would show them pictures.
So
I'm sure I would show them pictures of my little brother. My little nephew who looked like me when I was a baby.
And that was your
so
son.
it kind of just worked out. Yeah.
Nate, does this surprise you at all?
No, it really doesn't.
He's
is the
10
guy
years
who,
old now.
This
so.
is the guy who was also Michael Jackson when he was.
Yes,
growing up,
I did. It was back in my skinny days. Yeah.
Kory,
Wow.
Well, yeah. First of all, thank you for having me and saying all those nice words about me as well.
Glad to have you.
But yes, sir, absolutely. I do want to get married. I've wanted that for a long time, ever since I was young. Can't remember not wanting that.
Wait, how old are you, Kory?
I'm 32.
Okay, 26. Just making sure. Big age gap.
You got a lot of wisdom over here.
Yeah,
Sure.
I just want people to know
that.
that it can happen if you're in 20s and 30s.
Yes, it can happen.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question is, have you guys dated much? What's your experience with dating? And what have you learned through that process? So obviously we just brought up age. So 32, 26. Talk a little bit about what that's been like and the journey of dating.
Dating.
Dating sucks.
Yeah, it depends on who you're dating. It sucks. I wouldn't necessarily. You like my own personal dating life?
Yeah, your own personal life.
I haven't dated that many girls. I'm not like one of those guys that just has a new girlfriend every year. All the girls that I've dated, I don't even know that some of them are really actually like stamped dates, but I can count on my hands.
Yeah.
And the reason that is because I just was raised in a household that was very, very serious about who you choose to spend time with.
Which is good.
Not even dating wise, but just as a friend. So dating for
Kudos
me.
to your family.
Huh?
Kudos to your family.
Praise the Lord. I mean, dating for me was never a game.
Yeah.
It was always an intention behind it. And now that I'm a little bit older, that is marriage. But before, I didn't know what the intention was. I was just making sure that, listen, I'm not going to play with you. You're not going to play with me, right? So,
what's the biggest thing you've learned in the process of dating?
Oh man, I'm learning it right now. Jesus, I think the biggest process I'm learning in dating is that people process things on their own timing.
Yeah.
So you can't make them process it when you're ready for them to process it. You have to wait for them. Yes. And I am not always the most patient person. I'm pretty sure you know that, Nate.
Yes.
So that's probably the biggest challenge is, all right, just because I process it doesn't mean that she processed it the same way. So what about you, Kory? I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. That was a great answer. I don't know the answer to that
there's a
question.
lobster on your shirt. I'm sorry.
It's a crawfish, actually.
Oh, wow.
Pearless brand.
From New Orleans.
Love that. Okay. We got to tag them.
Yeah. No, I don't know. Let me tell you my story, and then you can tell me if you think I've dated a lot, because I don't really know what the answer is. But I didn't date at all in middle school or high school. I was actually homeschooled through middle school, and then I went to a private Christian school. And I knew for high school at that private Christian school that I wanted to go to the Army. And so I wasn't planning on sticking around. And it was a small class. It was like 54 students in our class, like pretty small school. And same, like I would echo kind of a similar foundation of what Matthew laid out is dating was not a game. It was very serious. Like dating was always for marriage for me. And I knew in high school I wasn't going to end up marrying any of these girls. I was going to go off to the Army and stuff like that. And so I never even got involved with that in high school.
Yeah.
Same with school. When I was at West Point, I went from 2010 to 2014, and I didn't date anyone there at all. I wasn't really talking to girls much. I didn't start.
Well, the percentage is pretty low, right?
Of girls, it's higher now. It was 14% when I was there. Was that?
Options are limited.
That wasn't my case, actually. Girls weren't just throwing themselves at me, you know.
Well, you know.
Unlike you. I mean, come on. You're a runner. You run.
I run now. I wasn't always a runner. But so no dating in high school or college. When I was 24, I had my first girlfriend, and it was a very short but intense relationship. Yeah. We dated for about 5 months, and she was a girl who I kind of knew from childhood. Like our parents knew each other real well, and I just ran into her once. And we started dating, and she checked all my boxes. She was a believer. She was beautiful. She had great character. I liked being around her. We enjoyed spending time with one another. And it moved really fast, and I proposed to her after about 5 months of dating her. And then we were engaged. It would have been a 3-month engagement, and I think she was a couple years younger than me. She was probably about 22, and I was 24, I think. But she ended up calling off the wedding like 2 weeks before the wedding. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think we just went too fast. Personality-wise, I'm very direct and frank with people, and I kind of expect other people to be the same with me. And so, and she, on the other hand, was a people pleaser and didn't like conflict. And so a lot of the nagging doubts she had, she kind of bottled up and didn't bring up to me. And I thought we were all good and everything was, this is just God-given. This is such a God thing. Like we're on track. And turns out she had a bunch of doubts internally. And those all burst forth 2 weeks before the wedding. And so that was ended not really on my terms. Yeah. And then I went through a season, probably 4 or 5 years of not dating very much at all. I had a couple dates here and there. Like, let me just dip my toe back in the water, see if I'm ready for this. And every time it was a resounding no of like, I am not ready for this. I'm not emotionally past, what happened. So that all happened when I was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. I was a lieutenant. I'm in the infantry. I was a second lieutenant for 3CR down at Fort Hood. It's called Fort Cavazos now, but Fort Hood, Texas. After that, I came to Fort Benning to do CCC, went to Alaska. I was in Alaska for 2 years, and while I was there, I didn't really date much either. I was just like nose to the grindstone. I was in company command, so I was very, very busy, and I just kind of threw myself into work. Yeah. And then I went from there to back to here, to iBullock where I work now, after company command, and that was about 3 years ago. And I was like, all right, I got to get back in on this. Like, I got to start trying. You know, if I'm gonna die alone, I don't want it to be my fault.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I started dating again. Met a girl on Hinge up in Atlanta. Dated her for about 6 months, and I was feeling it. I was like, this is awesome. She's
Wait, what
great.
is Hinge? Is that like a dating app or something?
It is like a dating app.
Oh, okay.
It's up there, you know, Bumble, Tinder, Hinge.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's a way. It's a method.
Mhm.
But yeah, met her. She was a believer too. We dated for about 6 months, and then she called it off. She broke up with me. And so again, second relationship ended not really on my terms. And at that point, I was like, all right, God, you gotta make this work. Like I whatever I'm doing is not working. Like I don't feel qualified to give anybody dating advice. I don't know how to read the signs. Like I was kind of discouraged. And so I went through another period of about probably 6 months after that breakup when I was just not even trying. I was like, I don't want to be set up with anybody. I don't want to go on any dates. I need some time and space to get past this. And then I decided to start trying again. So I got back on Hinge. I got back on Bumble, and I started going on a bunch of dates.
Wow. Man, shout out to Hinge.
I know. And Bumble. Don't forget Bumble.
Sounds like a news commercial.
Yeah,
right?
we need a sponsorship with Hinge.
It's a great, well, look, they sort people for you. So you can be like,
My
I want
word.
a Christian, I want a conservative, you know, whatever you want, whatever your desires are, it'll filter it for you. So that's really cool. But I started dating a lot, and this is fall. When was this? Fall of 22.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going on a lot of first dates. And I say first dates because almost none of these girls really met my standards for what I was looking for. They were awesome people, but just not what I was looking for. I knew right away, and I was very like decisive and clear with people. Like, hey, this is a blast. Like, but I won't be asking you on a second date. You know what I mean? I'm a big believer in like shutting that door firmly and not leading people on. So I went on a bunch of dates like that, and then I probably did that for 3 months, and then I got frustrated with it, and I was like, this isn't working. Like, these apps, it's just not working. It's getting me, I'm in a bad headspace. My purity's starting to slip, you know, like, and so I took another hiatus from the dating world, started training up for a selection, which I went to this past March. And that was kind of, I don't know if this is relevant, but I'll tell it just in case it is. I've always wanted to go into like the special ops side of the Army. In 2018, I tried to go Special Forces. I went to Special Forces selection, made it to the end, but then I was a non-select. So that door closed. And then again, this past year, I went to the Long Walk, which is Delta Force selection. And once again, I made it to the end, and then I was a non-select. And I took it in stride. You know, I've learned how to rely on God during seasons of disappointment like that and stuff, and just take that as a door closing. That's a no. It might be disappointing, but His plan's better than ours. So after that, I was like, okay, this whole special ops thing is just not in the cards. I need to start going on dates. And I'd been going to Church of the Highlands for a couple years at this point.
Love Church of the Highlands.
And there's a lot of beautiful women at Church of the Highlands, and a lot of handsome men, and
Thank you,
a lot
Kory.
of
Thank you for saying that. It's
prime
so
example
sweet of you.
here.
So sweet of you.
But I had a lot of people trying to set me up with friends and gals at church, and I was kind of like, no, I'm kind of focused on selection right now. And then when I got back, I was like, okay, I'm ready to like start pursuing somebody. And I had somebody in mind. I'd met her 2 or 3 months before selection, May Manley, the beautiful May Manley. But I knew her through mutual friends at church. So I asked her on a date. We started dating. This was in April of 2023. And we've been dating ever since. So
wow.
Getting back to your original question, have I dated much? I've
2023.
dated 3 girls seriously after college, and I've been on a lot of first dates. And so that's kind of like my dating story. And again, disclaimer, I do not feel qualified to give dating advice or single advice, but I appreciate you asking.
Well, that's part of the fun to me of the whole conversation, because I think at the end of the day, I would be nervous if you did feel like you were an expert. Because it probably wouldn't be somebody who necessarily want on the show talking about relationships. Because I think at the end of the day, relationships that are healthy and God-centered come with a lot of trepidation, and you often go along the way and go, I
I
don't
love
really know
that
what I'm
word.
doing. I don't know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And, uncertainty of going, I'm going to put my faith and trust in God in this relationship and see what God's doing. And it sounds like that's exactly what you've done. But I hear in there a lot of rejection.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, when you think about a proposal ending 2 weeks before, a relationship in Atlanta ending, and then all the things that you go through with the Army as well, of just like, all right, you're not getting selected.
Mm-hmm.
How have you handled and navigated that rejection in your own life and really given it to God, or what's that look like for you?
Yeah, it's been a journey, and I think I've handled them all differently. Like my first big rejection with the broken off engagement, I did not take very well. I felt really let down, and it took a lot of wrestling with God of just conforming to His will and a deep belief in His sovereignty. And one thing I found with all four, the two selections and the two relationships that were broken off, not on my terms, I found that my greatest source of comfort is God's sovereignty and God's plan, and a trust in the fact that His plan might be different than yours, but it's better. What I mean? He works all things together for good, as painful as it is. And I may not know why all this stuff is happening to me now. I may not know in 5 years. I may not know in 10. I may never find out until heaven. But a deep trust in His plan for my life is what has kept me sane.
Yeah.
And I have found that each time in reacting to those disappointments, when I press into Him and lean on Him for that strength, it helps. And that's a source of true comfort.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of good things that have come from each of those rejections. I can tell you stories about guys I've been able to relate to who've gone through similar things, comfort I've been able to give, perspective on life and stuff. But overall, it's if I'd sat down in high school and written out a book of what I wanted my life to be, it would be very different than what it is now. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I wanted to be married really young and started having a lot of kids really young, and that wasn't in the cards. And I'm
Well,
fine with that now, and
Yeah.
it's all buffed out. But I think that's a big part of maturing is kind of not resigning to your fate, but just learning how to trust God in a really real way.
Yeah.
in
No doubt.
disappointment.
Well, I was
Matthew?
already doing that apparently in middle school. I was already having kids and getting married. What I was thinking.
What about you, Matthew? Have you experienced rejection in relationships, and how have you navigated that?
You know what? This is so right on time question because rejection didn't even start as an intimate relationship. Right? It started with my father. So it jumped in. So that rejection jumped into every relationship.
Yeah.
Because he was not there, I assume that even if I love anybody, not just a female in relationship terms, that they would leave too.
Yeah.
So the problem that I had, and I'm still actually working on this, is that because I am scared, scared that a person will leave, I go and go and go and go and go, so that they'll stay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm still learning how to just be and not rush or not assume that just because we had an argument or just because something didn't work out that they're gonna leave.
Yeah.
So rejection it didn't even start with females. It started with my father.
Yeah.
Not being there.
No, I can see that for sure. And I think I just want to say, speaking into your life of just because that happened, that is not your story.
Yeah.
And God's scripting a new story. And that's the beauty of the gospel, beauty of what God does is really change our story, and what was broken, He restores.
Right.
And,
Right.
You mentioned though earlier, Kory, about dating apps.
Mm-hmm.
So totally changing gears.
Hinge.
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 How do you think dating apps, social media has changed dating, and for the better or for the worse?
Are you asking both of us?
Yeah.
Yes.
I got some thoughts.
Yeah, well, I wasn't on Hinge. I was on what was I on? I was on that Christian one. You know the Christian one?
Christian Mingle?
Christian Mingle. Yes, I was on Christian Mingle. Go ahead. So you're the veteran at the dating apps.
I don't know about that.
I didn't. This is my. Go ahead. You give the advice first.
Well, I think it's a perfectly valid way to meet people. I know a lot of happy couples who met on dating apps. A lot of people use them. Most people are on them, and I think you can make really great people on there, and you could meet the one on there. I know, like I said, I know tons of people who have.
Yeah.
I do think it comes with some inherent pitfalls and like things to be wary of. For some of the ones I've got experience with, Hinge and Bumble, you sit there and you swipe left or right, and most people like you'll set your parameters, like I said, like, oh, I want a Christian, or
Bumble becomes a fumble.
It can. I mean, you're sitting there all day,
That was my dad joke.
I know. I was like, okay, Nate. That was a dad joke.
Yes.
He got you off key.
He
Go
did.
ahead.
What was I saying?
He fumbled you. He tried to fumble
No,
the thing.
fumble my Bumble speech.
Yeah.
I think it can put you in a bad headspace to sit there and be swiping on people. Which,
Yeah.
let's be honest, you're looking at their looks. You're
Yeah.
immediately just checking out like how hot are they.
Yeah.
And I think that can start to gear your mind toward more fleshly type of things. I think it can make you start thinking about women and dating in a really ungodly way if you're not careful. And so there's that. I think it can also lead you into a lot of situations where your purity is going to be tested. Because you get to direct message somebody. It's like super low stakes. You can go meet somebody and hang out with them just once, and no one you know knows them, and no one they know knows you. And so you can, if you're not careful, you can put yourself in situations where you're tempted to stumble. And I did find myself when I was doing that starting to stumble more and more and more. And that's part of why I got off it. I was like, okay, this is becoming like untenable for me. Because there are a lot of beautiful women on those apps, and a lot of them will, even if you set your parameters right, they'll say they're Christian, they'll say all the right things, and then you meet up with them and they are not.
Yeah.
And
They just
have
want
different-
money.
Maybe
Money.
Maybe.
I'm looking at the camera for
something
the
else.
people.
or maybe something else.
Be careful.
But you just have to watch yourself and just like, if you're going to go that route, I would just be cautious and have like accountability partners who are really tied in with what you're doing, and just proceed with caution. But again, it could be great.
Yeah, I don't know, Nate. I mean, I think I'm going to probably echo everything Kory says about dating apps. I think that now in this generation, in this time, it is the way to meet people.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the right way to meet people, but it is a way to meet people. And I think you really need to know what you want if you're going to go on the dating app, and then have the ability to say no.
Yeah.
Like don't be the nice guy just to go on a date because they look good. You know what I mean? Because then you can get yourself in a
A lot of trouble.
Yeah, a whole lot of trouble, and then hopefully God forbid children. You don't want that. You know what I'm saying?
It's like Kory mentioned though. There's that accountability that's needed of what am I doing? Because I think one of the dangers in our phones in general, which is mostly probably where we're on that app, is it's really a private space that nobody can step into, and you can feel like it is a world where you can go and step away from the rest of the world.
It feels like you can get away with things on it.
Yeah, and that's not reality. But the enemy does a really good job of painting it as a place that nobody knows what's happening in this space.
Yeah.
Even though all the things that happen in that space are forever tied to us, we somehow feel like it's not, and nobody's ever going to know. It's not going to impact us, and we can almost become somebody that we're not if we're not careful.
Yeah, and my concern for people who go on dating apps is, I hope you're not going on there because you think you're running out of time.
Yeah.
Or I hope you're not going on there just because you think that you can't meet somebody outside in the real world. Yeah. Because then that becomes unhealthy, I think. If you're on there because I feel like, dang, I don't got no time to meet nobody. Well, you do. You're just not prioritizing time to be out and go out. So, yeah.
You asked about like how it's affected our generation and our time, and I think it's really hard to date these days. Because like harkening back to before I met May, it's tough even at church to meet people and strike up a conversation, and like,
especially if you're single, everybody think you're hitting on everybody.
Yeah, and that's the
at
word
church,
too.
Yeah,
is like I don't want to be
coming
across
look
the
at
creek.
Matthew and what's the name? They hitting on each other, But
like if you're not meeting people at church and like you can go out to bars and stuff and try to meet people, but it's really tough, and it feels like there aren't a ton of options because a lot of people have just gone to the apps and they just use those. Yeah. And a lot of people don't want to be approached at gyms, and they don't want to be approached in bars, and they don't want to be approached at restaurants. Like they expect to link up on the app, and that's about it. And so I think it's helped people make connections, and I think that can be both good and bad with our generation. But I think it's also like shut down a lot of the organic dating we used to see, like people setting each other up and people meeting out in public and stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's gone by the wayside for a lot of people my age.
How do you keep your way pure? Is it even something that
How to keep my what pure?
your life pure
Oh, okay.
from crossing physical boundaries?
You mean sex?
Sex,
Okay,
well,
okay.
for other people, it may be different boundaries. I mean,
Mhm.
I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that may be the wrong boundary. I think oftentimes we say sex is the boundary, but I think sometimes it needs to be a little bit closer to home and not, we're even guarding our heart
Mm-hmm.
of the emotions and what we're putting into, because I think sometimes you can go into a relationship and not do anything physical, but have given yourself emotionally in a way that was not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about that, how do you guys continue to try to set up those parameters in your life? And as a believer, do you feel like those, I mean, there's a lot of talk even among Christians of like, well, that's kind of a bygone time of standards. And today, as long as we love each other and we're committed to each other, then it's okay. So what are your thoughts? I mean, there's so much that can go on with physical boundaries. As a Christian, I think it's pretty clear, but there's a lot of people that want to debate that.
I'm having a hard time understanding what you're asking, Nate.
How far is too far?
Okay. How far is too far? Listen. When you're dating somebody, you need to have conversations about that before you even get tempted, so that when you are tempted in any form or fashion, not just sexual wise, right? Then you guys know. Okay, well,
yeah,
I know, and having conversations about it creates
it should create
a healthy,
boundaries,
not just about it, but a healthy space to tell, for you to be able to say to your person you're dating, I'm feeling tempted right now, so we need to go somewhere else in public with a lot of people or whatever. You know what I mean? So I think when it shouldn't even get to any kind of farness. You need to have conversations early in the
before.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I agree.
sure.
I think it's important no matter where your relationship is. You got to establish those boundaries really early. You got to establish them with yourself and like between you and God, like this is where I will go and no farther. And you got to lay that out with your partner, like pretty quick.
Yeah.
And maybe not first date, but like second or third, you got to be like, hey, just so you know, this is how I feel about this. And I think a big thing, and we kind of hit on it earlier, but accountability partners, having somebody in your life, a best friend or someone who you can really bear everything to. Because if you're trying to go it alone, if you're trying to white knuckle it, or even if it's just between you and your partner, you're going to slip up.
Yeah.
You can't rely on each other to keep those boundaries, because in the moment you don't know what's going to happen. And you can't just rely on yourself white knuckling it. It's gotta be between you and God, and it's gotta be between you and accountability partner who you can really be honest with and tell them everything. Because if you don't have that check in your life, like you can't rely on your flesh, you can't rely on yourself and your own strength.
Yeah.
So how have you done that? How have you kept that accountability partner? What does that look like in your life?
Yeah, for me, it's a good buddy of mine who I've known ever since high school. Super close with him, and we tell each other everything. We, in our single days, we talked a lot about masturbation and our struggles with that and how it looked with, whether we were struggling with pornography or other things of that nature. We would literally, like, there was a time when we were texting each other every day, like, hey, you still good? Yeah, I'm still good, you know, and we going back and forth and stuff like that. And that was a journey we went on together. And he ended up getting married, and I'm dating May, but even now I'll talk to him and be like, hey, this is what we did. Like, just so you're clear, I want to be totally honest, and like, letting him know what those boundaries are, and having him, be honest with me about when I'm stepping out of line, if that happens.
Yeah. No, it's really good. What about you, Matthew?
Yeah, I think accountability is the key. But I just keep going back to having the conversation. You cannot heal what you won't talk about.
Yeah.
And that's not just with the person you're dating, but that's with just anybody.
Yeah. You got to be vulnerable.
You have to be vulnerable. I think in any relationship, the more vulnerable you are, the quicker you can get to who you really are, the better it is for both of you individually. Like,
but I would say that vulnerability also, you have to be careful of who you're vulnerable with,
Of course, yeah.
because a lot of people will trample over your vulnerability.
Yeah,
and
here's how
wound you
you
even
know.
more.
Here's how you know you should not be vulnerable with somebody, or they're not your person. When you're put in a situation where you have to portray yourself, when you're put in a situation with a person, friendship or relationship wise, where you have to portray yourself, that's not your people.
Making yourself somebody else.
Exactly, exactly. So that's how you know. That's how you know. So it's all about the conversation, really.
Yeah.
That prevents everything. So
No, that's good.
that makes sense.
Oh, for
Okay.
sure,
Yeah.
for sure. And it's a topic where I think there's so much that we could talk more about, because I think as any guy, whether they're married or single, boundaries are super important, and knowing where we're going to go and what we're going to do. I mean,
Mhm.
we're in a time where, statistics and looking at pornography use and how rampant it is in our culture.
Mhm.
And so many people, one of the things with our groups, even our small groups, the one that's probably that gets our most attention is the one around sexual sin, because so many men are struggling with that, and often struggling alone, or don't feel like there's anybody that they could turn to for help.
Mhm.
And I think it's super important. There's been kind of a rejection against the purity culture of the past, and I think the reality of it is purity is super important. And I don't think there's anything wrong with purity rings or in all the things. It's just understanding that in that there's also grace. There's also, when there's failure, when there's mistakes, that God works in that to bring restoration and
Yeah.
healing.
Yeah.
I'm sure in both of your lives, there's been stories of, oh man, I messed up. And yet God has stepped in and provided so much grace and worked in those situations. Like you even talk about, of just seeing God's protection and his hand in your life now that maybe you was hard to see in the moments of some of those past relationships. When you think about where we are today in our culture, are there any tips that you would give guys outside of accountability? So find a friend to talk to. Are there anything else that you do or that you know of that might be helpful in maintaining your purity? Because I think a lot of people are asking, how do I do it? Like, I don't know how. This seems like such a struggle for me.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I do not feel qualified to give advice on this, but I can
Well,
tell
you're doing
you,
a great job.
Well, thanks. I can tell you what's worked for me with purity, specifically the masturbation, is drawing your own personal boundaries with what you think about, what you look at, far back from whatever that thing is that's going to trigger sin, right? So for me, it was Instagram, like looking at Instagram models or, different channels or whatever that might start to get me thinking and start to activate my flesh and start to tempt me throughout the day, even like in public, like, oh, I'm not going to do anything here. I'm in public. It's fine. But like that's setting up your mindset for later that night when you're alone and tired and your willpower is low. And so it's about that discipline with what you allow yourself to think about and dwell upon like during the day. You know what I mean? And there were seasons where I got off Instagram completely because I couldn't handle it. And then, there were seasons where it wasn't that big of a problem. But that includes movies, that includes music, that includes where you go and who you hang out with. There's going to be like little triggers little decisions, like incremental decisions throughout your day that build up to the big decision at the end of the day, which can help you. And a similar thing applies to like going back to the dating apps. Like when you're talking to girls who you're not sure whether or not they're the one or whether or not you should go on a date with them, if you start to feel your boundaries slipping, or as soon as you identify a red flag that's like, oh, this girl is not the kind of character I want to be with, shut it down right away. Don't engage with people, like going back to taking dating seriously. Like if you don't see yourself marrying this person, if you just think it will be fun to date them and maybe, kiss them or whatever like if you're not in it for that end state of marriage, don't even entertain it. Shut it down. Don't waste your time. Don't waste her time. Because when I was going on the dating apps, there were times when I was, engaging with girls and like going on dates with girls who I knew I wasn't going to end up marrying. And those were the times when I would slip up. And so it's like setting your own internal like discipline boundary far back from the cliff, if you will, what has been helpful to me as I've gone along.
Makes me think of Song of Solomon, don't awaken love.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, don't awaken the things in our life that we shouldn't be that we're putting there going, oh, I'm not going to pursue this girl. But we put ourselves in a situation where, we have made out. And then, the boundaries are being crossed because, I have not protected myself. I've not protected her.
Yes, I'm just echoing everything you're saying because even though you think you're not good at advice, this is really good advice. I think it is really so important to know what you want as a man. First of all, let me just say this.
So what is it? What are you looking for? I want to know, what's Matthew looking for in a girl?
Let me finish this. And I'll tell you because that's long. I think, first of all, in any man, before you start dating, you need to be cultivating something.
Yeah.
Like you need to be working on something in your life that is calling you higher or challenging you before you start dating anybody. Because I heard this guy on TED Talk, I forget his name, but he said the elevation of a man is because of a woman. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So a man, the higher a man goes, he is high in his career, in his life, and anything, because he has a great woman behind him. And I think in order for you to even understand what that means, you need to be working on something. You need to be called to something. You need to be giving your time to something so that this relationship doesn't become your life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it definitely makes sense because I think there's a lot of people that feel incomplete unless they have somebody. Right. And the reality of it is we need to be pursuing the Lord, pursuing the things of God, preparing ourselves for it. Right. And sometimes we can get so caught up in finding that person that we just, it consumes us. Right.
So in saying that, I'm not looking for much though. I'm not like, I don't have
you said it was going to take a while.
I don't have a long list. I'm just like, I used to have one, but I don't have one now. I really just love the Lord, love people, and understand who I'm called to be. Yeah. I think that's really big for anybody who's dating. You need to understand what you're called to be, and you need to understand what she's called to do. So because I think for together it brings y'all closer together. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. Like, does that make sense, Kory?
It does. I think, kind of to piggyback what I think you're saying, a lot of people put dating on like a pedestal. They think, as soon as I get the girl, then it'll all be like you're saying. People feel incomplete.
Life's complete.
I'll be happy then. And I think that they almost like want it too bad, like they're just desperate for something and they're willing to settle and they're willing to compromise and they're willing to, and I think when you stop holding that dream or that desire so tightly, and I like to think of like Abraham and Isaac, like God told Abraham to put Isaac on the altar and kill him. Yeah. And that was a test for Abraham to see how much faith he had. And he did it. And I've done that with like my dreams. Like we talked about the rejection in the army and the rejection with relationships. And like when that rejection comes around, you have to take that dream you've had for probably years. Yeah. For me, it was years. And just lay it on the altar. Be like, all right, God, here, you can have it. Like I'm not hanging on to it. I'm not tight-fisted with this. Yeah. Because I think that's the place God wants us to all get to. And I think when you're holding it with an open hand like that, you can still want it, you can still pursue it, but not be like, I need this. And if I don't get this, I don't know what I'll do, because like I've definitely had that thought before of like desperation. Yeah.
And God, you better hope that you are pursuing in a godly way, because if you are not, it will not end well for you, my friends. I heard this quote that says, if you pursue something out of the will of God, then you will be responsible in carrying it without his anointing attached to it. Yeah. So if you are dating or you're thinking about dating, you better be praying and asking God if this is something you even should be doing right now. Is it because this may not be something you want to, this may not be God's plan for you right now. Yeah. Maybe you need to be single for a while to understand, to love yourself and understand what you're called to, and then bring somebody else into the mix. But don't expect relationships to heal your broken patterns. Yeah. Or don't expect a relationship to be even responsible for building you all the way up. Pastor Kyle, I was talking to Pastor Kyle one time, Pastor Kyle Jackson, who's the campus pastor at Church of the Highlands in Columbus. He said that the number one thing that ruins relationships are false expectations. Like, I expect you to know how to heal me, and I expect you to know what to do. And I think that goes right into knowing what you want, right? And knowing if this is God's will. So that's all I can say. Praise the Lord.
We talked a little bit about accountability, and I would like to know, as we're talking about relationships, we've been talking about, obviously, relationships, the opposite sex. We've been talking about to married couples, but how do we cultivate good friendships as guys? How do we get to know each other? How do we maintain those relationships? Because I think as guys, sometimes we're the worst at that. I think, Kory, you probably have experienced in the Army. I think oftentimes in the Army where you're doing something together, you can have great relationships, or
shoulder to shoulder bonding,
sports team. But I think oftentimes we miss that in the church and in Christian community. How do we change that, and how do we maintain those relationships that are super healthy for us as guys?
I think in my experience, the hard part isn't starting friendships, it's like maintaining them. Because especially for guys like me in the Army, you move around a lot. Every 2 or 3 years, you're moving across country or somewhere you're deploying or something else, and you're like constantly joining new units and switching to other units, and people are coming and going. And so the hard thing is to like stay in touch with people. And it takes work and it takes effort. It takes like, picking up the phone and calling somebody on a Saturday, or like texting them on a Monday, like, hey man, thinking of you, praying for you today, and then it takes like effort of like going to see them. Like, hey, we're both home for Christmas. Let's go get a meal or whatever. Like, and most of my closest friends, like I probably have 4 or 5 like really close friends who I talk to often. And it's not like I say it takes effort, but it's not effort because we like hanging out together so much, and we have so much history, and we like talking so much that it's a joy to like carve that time out and like, let's just chat on the phone for an hour, or like, let's visit with each other. And so I haven't had to. Most of my close friends I've known for years and years and years. Like my buddy John, I've known since I was a kid. My buddy Levi, I've known since high school. A couple buddies from college who, I still keep in touch with.
I got a friend named Levi, by the way.
It's a great name.
Yeah, it's biblical. A great name. It is. Love it.
But yeah, friendships started with like, shared interests and shared circumstances and time. You enjoy spending time together, so you do. And then it grows from there. And vulnerability is part of it. But like, the hard thing is that keeping in touch, and it takes 2 to tango. They gotta want to keep in touch too. Sure. But it's the effort of actually reaching out periodically and making time to go visit them on your long weekends and stuff like that.
Isn't it true though? Like we talked about, even we're looking for a spouse, of finding somebody that we're compatible for. That we need friends who have the same values as well.
Yeah, I heard somebody say once, you become the average of all the people you spend time with. Like if they're good influences, it'll raise you up, and if they're bad influences, it'll tear you down. And so. And that's not to say you should never hang out with people who are different, because like we're called to minister and to evangelize and be truth and light in the world and not be like separated from them. But I think people you bring into your circle of trust, people you spend a lot of time with, should be people who are going to help edify you and, help you to represent Christ well.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think that who you hang around is eventually who you'll become. And there's this quote that I say all the time, and it's so true. And it says, the next 10 years of your life will be the same, except for the people that you meet, the things that you experience, the books that you read, and what you tell yourself when nobody's watching. And I think that quote is so true, because without people in your life, then none of those things can be possible without it, because you need people to have experiences. You need people to help you when you're down. And you listen, what's really important for any guy friend? You need a guy friend who's going to tell you like it is.
No
tell
doubt.
You when your breath stank, tell you when you shouldn't be pursuing that girl, tell you when you stank. Just really, you need somebody to tell you like a TI is, really. But you also need somebody who's going to build you up. You also need somebody who's not going to just tell you the truth, but just going to build you up. And you need somebody who's just going to listen. I think that's the biggest thing every man needs, is somebody in their life who they just listen to them.
Yeah.
You don't always have to give advice, because sometimes I don't need advice. Sometimes I just want you to listen. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So,
Couple more questions. The marriage or relationship that you look up to, or that you would like to model your
oh my gosh,
future
that's
marriage
such a good
after.
question. Oh,
Well, I would have to say my parents, like my
Oh.
dad and mom, like they are just the ideal as far as I'm concerned. They complement each other. They work well together. They're absolute partners in crime, and they just I just love how well they communicate with one another and how much fun they seem to have together, and they're always on the same page. And I think that's taken years, and
Yeah.
they've been married for a very long time now. Probably like, I don't want to guess. I bet it's like 35 years they've been married now. And so that's taken work. I'm sure it didn't start off that way, but the way they are now and the way they raised me and my siblings, like I just look up to it so much. And if I can have just like 10% of that, I'll be so happy,
Matthew?
listen, man, my grandparents set the standard. My grandmother and grandfather. Now, this is a story I tell. So if anybody tell you a different story, they're lying. My grandmother and grandfather met when they were 14. They broke up, married other people, had children by those other people, and then found each other again, and now been married 50 plus years.
50 plus years.
50 plus years. So I don't know the exact, it's 51. I don't know if it's 53 or if it's 50 plus. I know that. So for me, that is the marriage that I hope to emulate one day, because even though they cuss and fight, now they don't physically fight each other, but they cuss. My grandmother's a cuss, okay? I'm telling you, she is. And I know you didn't see it. Don't tell her. Don't mention that. He ain't seen no videos. But what I'm saying is, even though they have their moments, the best thing I've ever seen them do is, at the end of the day, they always dissect the day with each other.
Yeah.
And I remember being little and being in the rooms, like sleeping, because we all kept the doors open, because you don't close no doors around that house, okay? No closed doors around their house. You don't do that. That's against the law. But the door would always be open. I would hear them discussing how the day was, and I would hear them like give the roses of the day and the thorns of the day. And I thought, for me, that was the best thing. So their marriage set the standard for me, my grandmother and grandfather.
Two awesome stories, two awesome images that you guys have from your family, which is pretty powerful that you have those stories from your family. And I think, hopefully in our culture, we can continue to set great models for young people and people that really want to be married and what that looks like. Because I think there's a lot of unhealthy marriages out there and a lot of fear based on so many broken marriages, but there's also some really good, solid marriages and even second marriages that people are in that just, are model of God's goodness, His grace, and communication. So last question we ask all of our guests: what does redemption mean to you?
Redemption.
You first.
Okay. Redemption means to me second chance. You can get it right again. Yeah. Do it again. It means new beginnings. It means, for me, redeem means that I am flawed, but I can get up and try again. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
To me, off the top of my head, it means like I'm not going to get what I deserve, which is death and separation from God. Like, because of Christ's sacrifice on the cross, He died for my sins. Like, I'm going to get to go be in heaven with God forever. And I don't deserve that. And the things I've done in my life, the mistakes I've made, I should not have my ticket punched, but I do because of what Christ did for me. And that means the world to me.
Amen. Awesome. Wow. Well, thank you guys for being on the show today. It's been a blast. We'll definitely have to try it again. I'd love to have y'all back on the show.
Love that.
Just because there's so much conversation I think we could have together. Thanks again, Matthew and Kory. It's just been a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Nate Dog.